Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Sundays. My name's Alex Suber, and I'm joined today by my dad, the bishop, Reverend Jonathan Suber. Everybody's been making fun of me the past couple of days.
Oh, really?
Because I changed my Zoom name to Bishop Jonathan Suber for your conference. So I got on like a business call today with a company, and one of my friends he's like, "Oh, I didn't know we were going to have the bishop on."
That's hilarious. It's
funny. I was like, "Well, that's what I call myself, so I need you to."
Well, we say it's a nickname. You know, we said that one time we were teaching about something several weeks ago. It's a nickname since I was like 19. People call me the bishop, just playing. And now that I get older, people are taking it serious. So it's kind of just funny. Yeah. Well, you've been the bishop now.
You are the bishop now.
Hallelujah.
Well, we're excited. We've been doing this for several weeks now. People are really starting to get into it. I've had a lot of good feedback about, people watching these and being excited to dive deeper into the content because, that was the whole point of us starting this, is because we want people to learn more, to get more. And, we're like, hey, people are watching Netflix and YouTube and all that stuff all day long. Let's kind of tie in some of that Christian content, some of the things that
Sunday was a case in point, because that message you preached, there was so much content, and you would just hit a point. And at one point, now guys, I just have to say this, my own son told me to shut up in the middle of church. And because there's just so much content, I can't help it. I'm trying to preach the thought because he's working this thought out.
Well, especially after you already heard it the first service.
Oh, man, it's so good. Yeah, tell them about that. Yeah.
What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build up to the point. So I'm trying to, reel people in. I'm trying to, and so that when I hit them with that, that point, that they're just, wow.
Yeah.
So I'm building it up, and then you're over there, and you keep saying the point, and I get usually I can move past it, but I got so jumbled up. I was just like, "Dad, can you please?" So everybody laughed, and it was fine because it wasn't on the live stream or anything.
Yeah, but we're trying. That's why today's so important, is we can now go back over some of those things and just get into this, because this Comeback SZN series, which is really your heart, you've done the last two. Because this is an original series, and a lot of people ask us where we get our stuff from, normally from just talking to one another, or maybe one of our executive team, or believe it or not, our wives will actually just throw it out there.
Hannah was telling us something last night. She was like, "This would be a great series for y'all to preach." I'm like, "Well, you want to preach it?"
Yeah, it's really good. Do you want to preach it? Exactly. So I think that going back over this, because it is in your heart, I mean, this is stuff coming from you that's so straight. So when you kick this off, what was funny Sunday is you gave us three different options.
Right,
your
three different titles.
So, yeah, explain. That was funny.
Well, I mean, it was just this is one of those sermons that's really been in my heart, and honestly, it's always different. I mean, my process, but sometimes I can study and write and put out all my notes a lot, and then sometimes it just kind of like flows. Yeah. So I've flowed it, and sometimes me and you, like we've talked about this, where sometimes we'll start with the title and then we kind of work from there. Yeah. We'll start with the scripture, or we kind of get the message, and then you're like, okay, how do I package all of that into a title? So this Sunday I said, okay, do you want my churchy title? Do you want my nerdy title, or do you want my non-churchy title? Yeah. And there's a reason that we do that. A lot of times in our titles, we'll try to almost make it a little bit kind of shocker to people in a way, because they're like, oh, this is going to be, he's going to talk about that. So I said my churchy title, I think I said it kind of different both, but it was basically the DNA of a destiny, or the DNA of a dream. Mm-hmm. And then my nerdy title was I'm coded for a comeback.
Coded for a comeback. That got me right there. I was ready to preach on that.
And then my non-churchy title, which people are like, do you know this? I was like, yes, I know this. Well, the song is very explicit, but that's the reason I did it. I was like, this. Okay. I said, where's all the non-churchy people, all the people that, you have a past, da-da-da. People are laughing. I said, okay, well, for all of y'all, it's throw some D's on it. Throw some D's on it.
And all I was doing is hallelujah. I didn't even know what that meant. I just, pray the Lord.
And I was like, some people leaned over, they're like, are we cussing right now? I don't know what's
that's funny.
But it was exciting, and so we'll just kind of dive in, and we were talking about Joseph again, and again, guys, if you're watching this and you haven't seen the sermon already, go check it out. We're not going to go over every single thing. This isn't us re-preaching the sermon. It's us diving deeper. But I'll give you the scripture references real quick if you want to check them out. So Genesis chapter 39, verse 1 through 4, and then we went to Genesis chapter 39, verse 19 through 23, and then Genesis chapter 41, verse 39 through looks like 41. And so essentially what that was is we were looking at the progress of Joseph, of how he went from Potiphar's house, and then we kind of skipped over. He has false accusations. Then he's in the prison, and then he's in Pharaoh's house. And Pharaoh in the scripture says, now I'm going to make you essentially the head of my house, which if you're the head of Pharaoh's house, that's a pretty big deal. You know, you're the head of Egypt, and Pharaoh says only in issues other than the throne. So in every other issue, you're the highest commander in
Prince
Egypt.
of
now.
Egypt.
You're the Prince of Egypt.
Oh yeah.
The coat of many colors. And so so we got in, and I started off talking about DNA, and I know there were some people that loved it, and then some people that were just like, I have no idea what's going on right now. But I was just talking about, and I use Xander as an example, how when something's DNA, whether it's a person, or a lot of times in church we talk about this like in seeds, where you could have a small apple seed, but the coding and the plan for an entire apple orchard is contained just in that one apple seed.
Yeah.
And it's the same in our human lives. A person is conceived, and we believe life begins at conception, and so when they have that DNA, even though when they're microscopic, where we can't even detect them yet, we don't even know a woman's pregnant yet, they have all of the coding and the plan and the DNA, the processes, the chemical, all the things that they're going to need to grow, to flourish, for their bodies to grow. And then I started talking about how now, because of science for the past 20, 30 years or whatever, we've been able to, now we can, or not us, but somebody out there,
not us,
somebody that we can map that out. So if you gave me a sample of your DNA, someone that's educated, someone that knows what they're doing, they could look at that DNA and they would say, okay, well, I can tell you're this skin tone, you have this eye color, you have this hair color, you have all these different things. And so,
or just a drop of blood. I know we have a doctor friend that he literally can look at your blood, and you almost think it's spooky, because he began to tell you what's wrong with you, your personality type, the foods that you don't like to eat, like your sleep cycle. He can tell all of that by looking at that, and it just blows my mind because it's so far above my head. Right. I said this yesterday, but we were in another meeting, and when God in Jeremiah said that before you were formed in your mother's womb, I knew you. And that concept come to me years, like who is the you that God knew that you've never met yet? Because that goes back to this whole DNA thing. So God has literally placed from the microscopic cell as a seed in your mother's womb, you're carrying every potential that God has ever spoken over you was in that seed. And so many people don't realize everything that you need is in the seed. So instead of making excuses, you have to learn to activate.
Right.
And a lot of people want to know their what, or their where, or their how, when they need to discover their who. And I think that's where Joseph, when you brought it back to the DNA of destiny or whatever, is, and you're going to get in a moment in some of these steps where he gets into his character, his integrity, his development. But one thing that you said Sunday that I'm like, I've been preaching 39 flipping years, and why didn't I get this or catch this, is that the only place in these three scenarios, from the promise, going into the pit with his brothers, and then Potiphar's house, and then to the prison of the palace, the only place he didn't have a dream was Potiphar's house. Yeah. And he was consistent to the dream that he had before he got rejected. Yeah. And how many people can't serve God when they're disillusioned, disappointed? You preaching now, and I just want to get, because that's kind of takes us into a couple of the other steps. But how many of us, even COVID and so many people around the world struggling. I was on Sermon Saturday. We were Zooming to London and different areas and talking to pastors around the world where churches are still padlocked, or areas where they can't have. And so it's so easy, even in ministry, to be disappointed, be disillusioned. How would Joseph have responded to that? Because not only does his dream not come to pass, but now he's accused, and now he's complete, and he don't have a dream. He's not getting a new dream. It's not that the Lord's telling him, "Oh, hold on." No one's telling him that. And so I think talking about that development is so important in this process.
Yeah. So we talked. Kind of, I threw this out there too, kind of on the fly. As I was like, a fourth title could have been, the process of the promise. And we all go through these processes. I think that's something that has kind of been a personal revelation to me of, okay, we have these dreams, but there's a process there. You have to do certain little steps. And so often we, just like Joseph, we get the dream, and I talked a little about this a little bit on the podcast last week, but we get the dream and we're like, okay, God, well, you gave me the dream. Now it's going to happen right now.
Yeah.
Where the dream may not happen for years and years. And again, going back to the DNA, there are things inside of me, inside of you, inside of Xander. He's 1 year old, and there are things that are inside of him right now that they're inside of him. A scientist, that someone that was studied, someone that knew what they were doing, could extract his DNA, and they could begin to learn things about him, but he's not going to grow into those things for 20, 30 years.
Absolutely.
And of course, there's environmental impacts and all that different stuff, but there are certain things that are just inside of us. There's certain bone structure, there's certain different things, certain either resistance or kind of susceptibility to diseases and to different things. It's inside of us. And so I think people have to understand that just because the dream's inside of you, you are working towards it. It's not like God has put you on pause necessarily, but you just haven't grown into it yet. And I was talking about even as a child, there are things that, like Xander, which he's about to start walking, but there was a certain stage where if we would have tried to force him to walk, it would have been painful and could have messed up his legs and messed up his feet to where he would have had issues later on in life. And I think sometimes people are trying to force development of their dream, force development of their destiny, and it's just going to cause them pain here in the now, but then also pain in the future, because God's like, you're not ready for that
and out
yet.
of sequence. Because we could put I personally believe, and I prophesy, Xander's going to be a great football player. Yeah. He's got the body for it. He's got the shoulders for it. He's got the head for it. He's going to be a great football player. But we wouldn't just put pads and a helmet on him right now and go sit him at high school football game and say, okay, this is your number. This is the school you're going to go to. So we're going to put you here. He would be massacred.
Right.
In that.
You're going to go to Liberty Hill High School, so let's go ahead and put you in pads. Come on, we're going to do it.
Here we go.
At one.
At one, because what you just said, development and discipline. And so you cannot remove development and discipline from destiny.
Yeah,
and that I think that's just so much where Joseph comes in, and then him even being a foreshadow of Christ. You even get into the ministry of Jesus. It's very interesting to me that Jesus spent 3.5 times more being a man than he did having a ministry.
Yep.
So it was 30 years of becoming a manhood, 3.5 years of ministry, and we want to reverse it and do it completely backwards.
Yeah.
And so if Jesus himself had to mature and grow and to develop to the point to where God could trust him, the humanity side of Jesus, in order to be mature enough to handle the destiny of being God manifest in the flesh. Come on, somebody. The expressed image of the invisible God. For that, in order to come past, there was a process.
Yes.
So all of us, but a lot of people, though, because they don't have discipline and because they have not developed, then they want to blame other people. And that's where Joseph is, because people did reject him.
Yeah.
I mean, his brothers sold him. You said that the first week, and that was another scripture. I'm like, dang, why didn't I get that? When he tells his brethren, when he's finally revealed and all this, and his dad dies, and they're scared to death because his dad was protecting them. Dad's dead. Here we go. We're going to be beheaded. And he said, no, you don't understand this. You sold me, but God sent me.
God sent me.
It just blows my mind, because he wasn't blaming anybody. He was just like, yeah, you did it. You really did betray me. And then, of course, everybody quotes what you meant for evil, God has turned for my good. But the attitude he had to have, how many of us say that when we're betrayed, when we're rejected? How many of us, because you talk a lot about your setback, is now going to be your comeback. But that's based on this life of Joseph. How many of us look at the negatives in our life that they actually have been to reposition us for the purpose and the plan, the DNA of our destiny that God has placed in our heart?
Yeah, exactly. And we talked a lot about that in the first week of how God, we think a setback, but I kind of use an example of setting a bone back into place. Yeah. But it's so true. What you said is it has to be developed. There were things in Joseph that had to be developed, and we see this when he blurts it out to his brothers and to his family. It's like, okay, that was a true prophetic word from God. Yeah. But you didn't know how to interpret it properly, and it also wasn't time. And I think that's something that we teach a lot of people here at Oasis, because we are a prophetic house. We have people that, dream dreams, or they'll hear things and feel things, and sometimes it's like, yeah, that sounds like it's probably right, but is it the right season to reveal that?
Yeah. Are you being a jerk if you say that? Because the way he said it, I mean, it was truth. But like you said Sunday, for him to go and say, hey, let me just tell you something.
Right.
Whatever.
It was all about his status.
It was all about his status. And so the way he projected it, he literally, I don't know if he would have gotten as bad a trouble or rejected as much by his brethren if he would have approached it a little differently.
Well, yeah, if he would have known the protocols and been developed. So he goes to Potiphar's house, and that's kind of where the development really starts, because like you said, he wasn't blaming anyone. And I, in the scripture that if you look it up yourself and go back and read it, one of the scriptures I said talks about how he was elevated. He was put over the head of the household. One of the things I said in the sermon is, do you think he was put over the head of the household? And do you think I think the phrase that everything he did was done with excellence and prospered. It prospered. Yeah. And so I said, do you think that anyone in that household cared about his dream?
They didn't know he had one. Number one.
Yeah. Well,
they didn't care.
I kind of read into it a little bit, and I was like, maybe he's in the the servants area, and they're eating dinner, and he's telling them, yeah, well, I have this dream, and I know right now I'm doing this, but one day people are going to bow down to me and all that stuff. And they're probably thinking, okay, you're a little crazy.
A little weird.
And I just kind of imagine Potiphar being like, well, hey, I know, that's a great dream. I love how you have that dream, but my dog's mess is right here on the floor. Can you clean that up?
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's awesome that you have a dream, but there's a mop, there's a, and I think, I think people in today, and this is one of the big things that we wanted to talk about, people see that development as such a bad thing, as you're rejecting me. You don't see what God's put on my life. You don't see all the things that I've been through. And it's like, no, he had been through stuff. I mean, he had been rejected by his family, so he had family drama, he had family hurt, he had abuse. So many of the things that people can apply to their own life today. And even though he had already been through all that, there were still things that he needed to develop inside of him. And so in that season in Potiphar's house, we don't hear anything about the dream. There's nothing about his dream and that people are going to bow down to him. But what he's doing is whatever's given to him, he does with excellence. And whatever Potiphar gives him, it prospers. And so, Potiphar, I was saying, it's like Potiphar, okay, I'm going to give you my floors, and my floors are going to prosper. I'm going to give you my animals, and my animals prosper. I give you my bank accounts prosper. And so we have to be honest with ourselves, and those watching this, we have to be honest of, okay, yes, the dream is still inside of us. God put that in our DNA. But there may be something that we can do right now, and are we going to respond by saying, "Oh no, I'm better than that. I'm bigger than that.
Yeah,
I'm
got
called
a real
to."
ministry.
Yeah, I got a real ministry. God really called me. God called me to do X, whatever's in your, whether it's a business, whether it's a ministry, whatever it could be. Are we going to do that, or are we going to say, well, I have that dream, but here's the opportunity I have in front of me. Yeah. It's a broom, or it's to clean the clothes, or it's to do whatever Potiphar would have given him.
Well, development is it's almost another word for discipleship. Because he was literally being discipled as he is being developed. And you mentioned Sunday that we always talk about the disciples, but the other word that goes with it is discipline. And so he is operating. You can't prosper in everything if you're not living a life of discipline. So this is his season of operating in discipleship or discipline, which led to development. But in our culture, do you agree that in our culture, discipleship looks like punishment?
Yeah,
like being developed. We talk a lot about
discipline.
Discipline exactly.
Is punishment.
Discipline is punishment, and we look at that now. If you're playing sports, it's not. If the coach tells you to run up and down the bleachers and all,
I don't know now.
I know now.
Even the world we live in, people are like,
now,
well, you're the coach, but I think I know better than you, so I'm gonna do it my own way.
Or anything that hurts me. When I was in school, it was no pain, no gain. But nobody wants to talk about the process because the process is painful. But we talk about it a lot, specifically in the issue from fatherlessness, or people that have never been fathered. It seems that we have a generation that views correction as rejection. discipline, and discipline as abuse.
Yes. Yes.
So what if he loves you enough and is giving you a dream enough? What if he's chosen you to be the prince of Egypt? But because of the destiny that's on you, he can't trust you with Pharaoh's coat until he can trust you to lose your coat to flee from sin and temptation. And the discipline and character that when Potiphar's wife reached out to molest him, he was willing to literally lose his coat in order to flee temptation. So when he had the discipline to lose his coat, then God says, because you were willing to lose that in order for what was right, I've got a coat over here reserved in Pharaoh's closet.
Even better.
It's going to make you the ruler. When they see that coat, it's going to change everything. But so many people don't want to go through that. Well, I'll go ahead and sneak around. Nobody's going to know. I can do this on the down low. I can do sneak in here, creep in here, whatever. And all God is asking you to do, can you develop in the dark? Because that's where you're developed, is in a dark room.
Right.
Can you develop in the dark? And that's what that season of development was, his dark season. And we are in such a Instagram culture that it looks like nobody ever wants the spotlight off of them. But you can't develop in the light. So if you're always in the spotlight, you're always creating your own platform, you're always pushing your own agenda, there's no private place for the pain and no private place for you to process what you're going through in order to prove that I'm going to be worthy of this dream.
Yeah.
Paul said that we're to walk worthy of our calling. Nobody talks about that.
Yeah.
Nobody deals with that. Yeah.
Nobody deals with that. Well, even the whole thing, like you just said, of I'm going to give up my coat, or I'm going to reject Potiphar's wife. I think so many people, if they would have been in that same situation, they would have been like, well, God, you gave me this dream and it's not going to come through. And now I've been working so hard. I've disciplined myself. At least I've earned something for myself. I have a little bit of notoriety, and I have a little bit of a position, and I have a little bit of authority and control. Well, I don't want to lose this too. And that gets back to the whole, at some point we talked about, we're kind of going all over, but at some point I talked about how, we can, it's so easy for us, it's so tempting for us to give up the best thing that God has for us in the future for a good thing now. For us to be like, well, I don't want to go through all the pain and all the heartache, or maybe you've already been through some and you're like, well, this is all I can take. I can only take being sold into slavery by my family. I can't take all that other stuff. So I'd rather just have a lesser version of the dream, or a lesser version of what God has for me, versus going through all this pain and disappointment and the dark place like you mentioned. I would rather just settle right now. And I think so many people, again, maybe not even a sin issue or even that it's this horrible thing, but they just settle because they're like, I can't go through, or that in their mind they're thinking, I can't go through any more pain, I can't go through any more loss.
And that goes back, that goes back to character. A lot of people don't realize there's a huge difference between integrity and character, and you can be coded and not have character to carry it out. So you can be coded for a comeback, and your character will keep you from your comeback.
Yeah, because I mean, if he would have,
you can't handle it, your character.
Well, what if he would have given in to Potiphar's wife, and even if nobody would have found out, he would have just stayed in Potiphar's house, and again, that
he would
whole
have been a big dog in Potiphar's house.
He would have been a big dog. He would have been. I'm sure Potiphar's wife would have looked out for him, made sure nobody messed with him. But again, it's you're settling, but then not only are you settling, going back to the first week, the thing that you think is a setback that's taking you backwards is actually what's pushing you to
repositioning
what God has for you.
Absolutely.
So he had to develop, and one thing that I talked about that I want to talk about just for a moment is how even in the real world, sometimes there are dreams that people have, and not only do they have to personally develop things, but there may be systems or technology or time or money or relationships that have to be developed before they can see the dream come to pass. And the example I used was James Cameron, who is kind of the producer, director, writer, all that kind of stuff of Titanic. He's done other million things, but
watch the sermon
Avatar
to get the invitation of Titanic.
Yeah,
just please watch the sermon.
That's worth it just for that.
It's worth it, yeah.
But he created this movie Avatar. It was for several years, the highest grossing movie ever made. But the dream, so he had not like a dream in his heart, like he had a literal dream about these characters that became the Avatar characters, and they were these tall blue figures that had tails, and it was this planet that the flowers would light up and all these different things. So he had that dream when he was 19 in his parents' house, before he had any influence, before he had any money, before he had any credentials or any kind of support or backup or clout. He had that dream for Avatar. And he could have made a version of Avatar way back then, but he knew, okay, first of all, when I'm 19, there's just no way I can make it. But even after he made like the Titanic in the early 90s, he would have had the opportunity, the money, the influence, the studios, all those different things. But he realized that there, not only do I need to develop, but there is technology and there are things that need to develop before I can create the ultimate version, the best version of this dream that I have. And so what I really got out of that was, and that's just something that I've known, it just fascinates me. I've known, I didn't find it out for this sermon, but it's so cool to me that sometimes we're developing ourselves, but at the same time, God is developing somebody else. So that when we are, when it's His timing, maybe we've been ready for a long time, but when it's His timing, the thing that we've been developing and they've been developing, even though we may not be friends, we may never get to know each other, but you may have a dream in your or you may have a dream in your heart to do something, and somebody else has a dream to create this website that has the technology to do what you want to do, and you may never meet each other. But if you both don't develop and create the dream in your heart that God's given you, then you won't be able to accomplish it.
Well, life moves at the speed of relationships. Whether you meet those relationships or not, like you say, in person, but the seed that comes out of that, the creative that comes out of that. And that was an incredible thing when you talked about how that the actual technology to create that on the green screen or whatever.
The CGI.
All that kind of stuff did not exist at all. And so what is God put in your heart that if you do it too soon, and you release it too soon, or you tell your dream too soon, and so sometimes there's just that in between season that it's waiting, and I know we don't like to wait. And so what I years ago I read a book and I think it's great. I just want to tell somebody that's listening that may be in this season, don't waste your wait. Don't waste this opportunity. As Alex is saying, what is in front of you that can prosper because of you? What is it that it may just be cleaning the kitchen real good before your wife gets home. It may just be making sure that your car, you got a car, will make sure the tires are shining. Whatever that you have available in your hand that is presented with excellence, what are you doing with what you have that someone could say, man, you're such a good steward with this. I want to take you to the next level.
Yeah. Well, let's get a little like applicable for that for a second, because I think a lot of times we can talk about just theoretical and that sort of thing, but we're in the ministry world, we're in the church world, and we have seen when people have a dream in their heart, and even if it's one of those things like we said, it's from God. I mean, people believe, people have confirmed it. It's been confirmed by other people, but you and I have both seen people, whether it's starting a church or starting a missions organization or going on a trip to somewhere that they're really not prepared to go on that trip. These different things that. You kind of only get one shot to start something. It's kind of like a first impression type of thing. And so people will do something out of season, out of due time, and it messes them up. And they're not able to recover. Then they become
disappointed and feel like God led them wrong. Maybe I can't trust God because He told me to do this and I did it and it failed. But it had nothing to do with the dream. It had nothing to do with the promise. You go ahead and talk, and I'm going to pull up. One of our guys sent something last night. It was on Instagram. One of our incredible guys, an attorney in our church, who's a young single guy, incredible guy. Did you see what he put? I want to pull it up because it goes along this, and I'm going to say what I'm going to say what I reached out to him to kind of.
Well, just to kind of keep going on that point, I think people, whether it's even starting a business, different things. Like I talk with a lot of young people, and they're like, I have this business idea, I want to do this thing, and I'm like, that's really cool, that sounds really good, but you've never had a job before.
Oh, wow.
You've never, you struggle showing up on time to places.
Wow.
You struggle, and I've used this illustration before, but we have a ton of incredible business owners in our church and lots of different professional people, every different field. And it's so funny to me, though, that people it could be young people, or it could just be people that are kind of restarting in life and doing something new, but they're like, man, I had this dream to let's use start a business example. And it's like, well, that's awesome, but you got fired from the last 3 places.
Yeah.
So because of you, not because, but it's like you were late, you didn't meet timelines, you didn't meet your budget, you didn't. And so why do you think that stepping into your dream right now that you're all of a sudden going to flip this script?
Yeah.
Because I think we get caught up in this thing of where if I could just make it to the end goal, like Joseph,
exactly.
If I could just get to Pharaoh's palace, and it's like, no, you're going to make yourself look like a fool.
You try to get on the throne, you're going to get killed.
Yeah, you're going to make yourself look like a fool.
Here's what he said. He said, we can't accomplish the vision of our life until we've learned to fully submit to the vision of another. And then on top of that, he said, this guy's incredible. He said, so many people out here trying to lead their own movement, but never learn to serve someone else.
Wow.
Best advice I ever received was fully invest in someone else's ministry before you attempt your own. And I messaged him back because we both love him. I messaged him back and I said, you're doing that. And I said, my ceiling will be your floor.
Wow. Because
he's proven that in the local house. So everything that I've got as he serves and is giving, and it's totally, I mean, he practices this. This guy practices this. As I've said, so here's the thing. 40 years of ministry, my ceiling will be your floor because of that whole process of development and discipline and literally living that out.
Well, that's what Joseph did in both, and we'll kind of go to the next step of the story, but that's what he did. He went from Potiphar's house, so he's falsely accused, and then he goes to prison. And both times, the whole progress of the promise thing, I mean, he's not being celebrated, but both times it talks about how, it says the prison keeper put the entire prison under Joseph's care. And that it actually says that the prison keeper didn't even ask what was going on just because he knew Joseph was taking care of it. Now, think about how many people in our lives that we, pass over responsibility to or whatever. But think about how oftentimes we have to check up on them and be like, "Are you okay today?
Did you
do you still believe in the dream? Do you still believe you're called?
Are you still saved?
Believe, are you still praying? Are you still reading the Bible? Are you still doing whatever?"
Yeah.
Joseph didn't have any of that. His family thought he was dead. Everyone had abandoned him. All the people, all the friends I guess he had made in Pharaoh's house.
They thought he was a convict.
Yeah, they're like, "Well, you're going to prison, dude.
Yeah.
You're a rapist. Like, come on, let's be
basically,
honest."
yeah.
So everybody turned away from him. So when no one's encouraging you, no one's building you up, no one's saying, "Hey, this is a good thing right here." No one's saying if you do this, then you'll get this.
Oh no. See, no one's giving him the next step.
No one ever told Joseph, well, if you're really faithful in the prison, then Pharaoh's gonna call you up.
Wow.
So many people want to be like, and again, we do the whole ministry world, but you can apply it to anything. But so many people want to say, okay, well, if you're real faithful in youth ministry, then in 5 years we're gonna ordain you as a minister, and you can go start your own, plant your own church, whatever. But if you'll be faithful, or if you'll be in this low level position at this company for 3 years, we'll promote you. But you just got to stay. He didn't have any of that. Wow. So what do you do? When you don't have the next step?
Absolutely.
Are you still going to be faithful and say, okay, I'm in a prison right now. I'm gonna keep the prison nice. I'm gonna keep the prison clean. I'm gonna help organize the prison. So not only was he being faithful and he was developing inside, but he was also developing his skills. He was developing his skills because Joseph, and again, we're kind of reading into the text a little bit, but he was the youngest. We know that he didn't do the work that all his brothers did. He kind of stayed more in the tent. He did, his studying and all that kind of picture I kind of have is, he has the fans and somebody's feeding him the grapes and all that sort of thing.
Got the special coat.
We know he wasn't, he just didn't have as much experience as, say, his older brothers did. But then he goes to Potiphar's house, and, whether he was taught by someone or he just learned by doing, he learned how to, okay, I'm gonna now lead these servants. I'm gonna lead these teams. I'm gonna figure out strategies. I'm gonna figure out scheduling. How do we keep the floors clean? How do we keep all these different things? And then the same thing in the prison. He's like, okay, I'm gonna figure out how to organize these resources, organize these people, organize this timeline, all this different stuff. So he could have had the dream inside of him and had the knowledge and had the anointing, and this is something that we're real big on. You can have the prayer life and all those different things. I said it in the sermon. Your calling is from God. You get that through prayer, but your gifting you get through practice.
Yeah, that was incredible.
And so there are
yeah.
people that God has called them to something that's going to require a gifting that they just have to practice.
Yeah.
Like you have to practice how to make a sale. You have to practice how to preach a sermon.
Exactly.
You have to practice how to put an IV in someone's arm if you want to be a nurse or a doctor.
Yeah.
You know, there are things that just comes down. You
We
just have to practice
to sing
Yeah.
or to play. People say, I'm called to worship ministry. I'm like, can you sing on key? You know, it's or like me, be a missionary. I can't tell you how many people come to me and want to be called somewhere. And years ago, it was more they'd be going to Asia, to India, to China, whatever. And I remember this young lady at a conference I preached come up. She's just crying and bawling. She's over the super, all this stuff. And I'm like, well, what's the deal? She said, well, I'm called to China. And I just ready to go now and all this kind of stuff. She had come out of Bible school and she just didn't understand because her pastor, no one was sending her to China. And so my first question was, how do you speak Mandarin? And then what dialects of Mandarin do you speak? And she looked at me like, what do you mean? I'm like, if we sent you to China today, you don't even speak the language to communicate the gospel. You can't even read the New Testament in Chinese. Why would God send you to China when you can't even read John 3:16 in Chinese? So it was just like a shock to that. And then I ask, have you witnessed to your neighbor next door? Because I tell anyway, call to missions or evangelism or even ministry, people say, oh, I just feel a call to preach. Well, preach means proclaim. So did you proclaim to people in school? You know, one of the testimonies here of our friend Taylor, that when she told me, I asked her that typical question. She was called to mission field. And I said, well, here's the deal. What about witnessing? Oh, yeah, I've led both my neighbors to the Lord. Right. And they're like, well, if you got preaching, I've scheduled the high school my senior year is going to let me have a crusade in the gym. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe you're called.
maybe you're called. But there's skills that you have to develop. And I think, there's always, people, it's like, the phrase, and I've quoted this over myself at times when I'm feeling, down and I feel, discouraged, but it's like, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And that may be true in a spiritual sense, in a ministry sense, in an anointing sense, but there still comes down to the nitty-gritty work of you have to figure out, you have to learn your voice as a preacher. You have to figure out how to exegete the text. You have to figure out how to study. You got to figure out how to read a lot of books.
Well, let's
there are
talk about
skills that you have to learn.
What if he had misinterpreted the dream?
Yeah.
What if he had told the wrong one was going to die and the wrong one was going to live? What if he had told the baker and the butler? What if he had?
Well, yeah, we haven't even got to that part yet. So let's just go there real quick. So when he's in the prison, when he's being faithful, he's in the dark place, he's in the pit. Yeah. Come on, it's been preached before. Yeah. Two new prisoners come in, and it's the baker and the cupbearer of Pharaoh, and they both have dreams. And what I think is interesting is this is the first time we see him interpret someone else's dream. And one of the points, and I want to get to your point, but one of the points that I had is it's interesting that he kept going down, down, down until he helped someone else in their dream, and then he started going back up. So many of us are just focused on our dream, are focused on me.
Yeah.
And God is saying, when are you going to use your gift and your calling to help someone else in their dream? And I think that's the beautiful thing about the local church. And what we try to do is, okay, if we're the body of Christ and I'm the hand and you're the arm and somebody, that if we all come together, we're all supporting each other's dreams. And if we could all get unified, that we could all make this progress together. But just what you were saying, so he goes and there's these two and they both have dreams. And essentially it comes down to one's going to die and then one's going to be restored. So we know the cupbearer is restored and the baker dies after 3 days. He's executed. But again, if he hadn't been developing that skill.
No, if he hadn't learned, and I say it this way, if he didn't learn how to prophesy in prison, and there's so many people that have never learned how to prophesy in the midst of their pain and their problem.
Wow.
And so the only way that God is going to elevate, I said this last night just skimming over, because I preached a different sermon last night, but this series is in my heart. And I have a concept I call the theology of the bottom. is the depth of your pit determines the height of your promise.
Wow.
The depth of the dungeon determines the height of your destiny. It goes back in that DNA thing. So what if Joseph hadn't practiced it? Just like Mary, the Bible said when the angel appeared to her and gave her rhema, that she pondered these things. The word things there in English is actually rhema. She pondered this rhema in her heart. She pondered it. She began to think about it. She began to practice it. So we teach people here, I tell people, if God begins to speak to you, you don't blurt out what God says. You journal it until you become so sure that you know this is the voice of God. This is the word of the Lord. Because so many people, just because you have an impression doesn't mean it was God. It could be indigestion. Or just because.
Or now, like we always say, the spirit of suspicion.
Well,
you just saw somebody on Facebook.
There's no such thing as discernment. There's discerning of spirits.
Right.
So what a lot of people call the gift of discernment, yes, it's discerning of spirits. It's not the gift of suspicion. And just because I have a bad feeling about somebody doesn't mean it's God speaking to me something negative about them.
Could be body language. Could be things that you've heard.
They told him his dream and he had a bad day and he got it confused or he mixed it up because his entire destiny depended on his interpretation of something that was insignificant to him at the time. There was no indication that anything he said to them, his relationship with them meant nothing to him. Because he's only going to see them for a little bit. They're just political prisoners that are in and out all the time in a culture like that. So a very insignificant transaction, if he had not been correct and intentional, he could have missed. It's the hinges of his destiny. So the hinges of his destiny depended upon a correct interpretation, maybe a conversation that could have took less than 5 minutes. So a casual conversation that could have took as little as 5 minutes hinged and swung the door of destiny where he becomes second only to Pharaoh in the kingdom. How many insignificant things in the dark in prison do we miss because we're angry, we're bitter, we go back to bitterness, we go back in these areas. Well, I don't care. Yeah, you had a stupid dream. Well, here's your stupid dream. Here's what it meant. And you're flippant with it. But instead of being flippant with it, he cared, like you were saying a while ago, he literally invested his time and his gift, and now look what happened.
Man. Yeah, he invested into other people, and then because he invested in other people,
in a very insignificant season.
Right. Well, and then even after that, though, he was still forgotten about.
So that's the point you said. Something got me. Yeah, he was forgotten about.
The cupbearer. So it comes true. The cupbearer does go back to Pharaoh. And as he's leaving, Joseph is like, "Hey man, don't forget about me.
Remember me.
Let people know, like I'm a good guy. I'm not supposed to be here. This isn't me.
Yeah, here's my Instagram."
And the cupbearer forgets about him. And it's not until 2 years later that Pharaoh has a dream, and they try to get it interpreted by everyone else. And then the guy, like I said, I was like, hey, wait a second. This dude I was locked up with, he interpreted my dream and he got it.
A lot of Oasis can relate to that.
A lot of Oasis. So it's like this dude, I gave him my ramen noodles and he interpreted my dream.
Yeah.
But it was so he had been forgotten about it by his family. He had been accused. And then he did the right thing. He tried to help somebody, and they forgot about him.
And then you said that, and I want to say that today to those listening, specifically in ministry. How many of you in ministry have been faithful with little? You have prophesied in prison. You have developed in the dark, and you still feel forgotten. That's the whole thing that we're trying to talk about in this season right now. And if you want to message us or if you want to reach out to us, what's this sermon? That's one of the things that we're called to, because I think that there are people that feel that way and just need to be encouraged to hold on. Just being, if it's a word from the Lord and you're doing your very best, God, a man's gift will make room for himself.
Right.
And so I believe that this is a case in point with Joseph, but he was forgotten. And where are you in the process of your promise where you feel forgotten?
And
we've all been there. We've all been there
multiple times. I think that's the thing that, again, I keep going back to. So many of us were willing to go through a painful season or a hard season, but then after that, we're like, okay, now I'm ready for the reward, though. Now I'm ready for the promise.
Well, if we know we're going to have a promise, at this point, by the time he gets out of Potiphar's house, he's in prison. At this point, he doesn't know he has. See, we're looking at it from the end, but at this point, him going through the process, he doesn't know that he's going to be second to Pharaoh. All he knows is he has, ever since he had this dream, life has gone downhill.
Life is bad.
Yeah, everything sucks. So he has no idea.
You can take that dream back.
Exactly. And how many people do that? Because he didn't know that 2 years later he's going to get a call. He didn't know that. But at the same point, he lived at such a point, and your mom said something years ago. She wrote an article, but this, when she did it, I'm like, oh my God, why didn't I preach that? Why didn't I say that? Because she's sometimes better than me. I'm like, oh my goodness. But she said, when they did call, when Pharaoh did send, where all it took was a shower and a shave, the Bible said that he bathed and changed himself, shaved himself, a shower and a shave. He was ready to be second to Pharaoh. He was in a prison. All it took was a change of clothes, and everything shifted. He was that prepared. And when it comes to destiny, are we really prepared? There's promises God's placed on me, promises God's placed on you. If that phone call comes right now, can I go in, change, take a shower, walk out, and step into it with the skill set, the mindset, the discipline, the body, the health, everything God's placed in me? I can step in that and never break stride. Because the moment Pharaoh, he interpreted the dream, he never broke stride. He went immediately from interpreting the dream to being second in the kingdom.
And having a plan.
He didn't have to warm up. He didn't go get a degree. He didn't have to go get on the internet. He didn't say, well, give me 3 years and I'll go figure that out. He already had it in his heart. Yes. He was ready to work.
Yes.
And so I think that that's where so many people in this development in the dark, we can't leave that developing discipline. Are you ready? People say, I just feel called to this. Okay, if that door opens today, do you have every skill? Do you have the mental stamina? Do you have the ability, the certifications? Do you have the ability to live on 4 hours sleep a night? Are you that disciplined that you can handle it? You want to be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company? Okay, how many nights a year are you willing to leave your family? How many hours a day are you willing to work? How much stress can you handle? If you can't handle enough stress being a greeter at Walmart, how are you going to handle being the president?
Right.
And I think that that's what Joseph proves, that everywhere he goes, he's able to handle the stress of every level. And I know people, I've met with people who have great potential and have no aptitude or no emotional strength to handle challenge or chastisement or rejection. And the smallest thing causes them to, so God can't let you handle the pressure. Because if you can't handle the pressure, he can't build a foundation on you.
Yeah, and it goes back to the whole thing of having someone push them and promote them, and you're going to make it, you're going to be okay. One more thing that I want to talk about, or we may get into a few other things, and I know you're going to talk about this a little bit coming up on Sunday, but I think the thing that we can't overlook is how he went, down, 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 down. And that moment when it's like, okay, go to you're being called up to Pharaoh's palace, to his house, wherever it was. You have to think for a moment that there had to be this thought process in his mind of, am I going to get hurt again? Am I going to be let down again? Am I going to be accused again? Am I going to be forgotten about again? Are they just going to use me again? Am I going to go up there and interpret a dream and then they're just going to put me right back here again? And so many people get caught up in this thing where it's like, I don't want to go again. I don't want to try again. I tried my dream. I tried to be in a godly relationship. I tried to do the business. I tried to do the ministry. And I don't want to go anymore. And
well, especially in a culture when you're saying that. When I studied years ago, one of the best books I've read on Joseph and this whole thing with him and Potiphar's wife, it was a Chuck Swindoll. He did a series on biblical characters, and it was so good. But one of the things that we skip over is when he went and got called from prison. If you got called from prison in that culture, you're either going to be released or executed. He didn't know which. He didn't know which.
Wow.
So when he is brought out of the prison, there's a big chance that he thought he was going to be executed, number one. Number two, when you're asked a question, just like Daniel going all the way back in the book of Daniel, when you're asked a question, if he missed it, talk about practicing in prison. He got it right with a cupbearer, but you better get it right with Pharaoh, because his gift made room. If he had missed it, none of this would have happened. So yes, we have character, we have development, we have all this, but then you got to get into the gifting that he had, the spiritual gifting of being a dream, because it doesn't matter how charismatic and how disciplined and how much you work. On the flip side of everything we're talking about, you can do all of that right, and if your gift doesn't work, then at the moment the door opens and you have an opportunity for your gift and it's wrong, everything falls apart. And he would have been executed. That shows the heart and the spirit he had. I think the thing, and I'm going to deal with this Sunday, and we'll talk more next week, But he had already dealt with his bitterness.
Yeah.
He had already dealt with rejection issues, bitterness issues, and fear issues. Because how else could he walk into an arena where he could be executed and speak with such acute accuracy? Strategic accuracy and boldness to Pharaoh, who had the power to take his head off. Because I think he's somebody that had already died. I asked one of my mentors years ago who was I won't mention his name, but extremely well known and amazing church, man of prayer and all this, but also very hated by his own brethren, just like Joseph. People talk about him running down, whatever. And I remember I was very young and we were sitting at a table. Stephanie and I were just in awe of being with this incredible man of God. But I just had to ask the question, how do you handle all these people talking about you and all this stuff? And he looked at me like I'd lost my mind. And he said, you can't hurt a dead man.
Yeah.
And he told the story of how when he laid his body for ministry and put himself on the altar and sacrificed his will, his purpose, his desire, he said, I died. You can't kill a dead man. And somewhere back there, we'll get into how he named his sons, but somewhere in prison, Joseph had an encounter and made a decision. And so rejection, bitterness, and fear didn't exist in his spirit. And he was able to walk in at that exact time. He actually became Pharaoh. He became a father to Pharaoh.
Yeah, that's what the word says. He became a father to Pharaoh. Not only just in charge, but a
father. Yeah, a
mentor, a leader. One thing now, I was just looking back at my notes for a second, and I think we can't skip over this. It was kind of towards the beginning of the message, but you talked about, the shower and the shave, the step up, being ready for when you're there, and you step into your destiny. And there's been sermon, the door of destiny, the doorway of destiny, and I put this on my Instagram, and one thing that I think we just can't look over of the whole DNA of a dream, talking about that, going back to the very beginning of the DNA, is the DNA is unique. And so it may look similar to someone else. It may have a similar end goal, but all of us are going to have a unique pathway of how we get there. And then all of us are going to have a unique style, approach, stories, anecdotes, all those different things are going to be unique to us, even if seemingly it's very similar to other people. And so I think what can happen is in those dark places, in those deep holes, in those prison places, we can start to doubt ourselves. And so we start to have this thing of, well, let me copy someone else,
imitate somebody else
DNA. Yes. And we know that there, sometimes you do imitate people to learn skills and different stuff. But when you start to take that on of, okay, well, this is what God has called me to do. And it's like, no, that's not what God called. That's not what God told you to do a couple chapters ago.
Yeah.
But because you've been hurt, because you've been lied on, because you've been offended, it's like, well, I would much rather take their dream. I would much rather take what they have, because it seems like they've had it easier than me, or they had a better start than me, or because of where they're from, or whatever excuse that we can use. And the thing I put on my Instagram is it's like having a fake ID. So we have a fake identity. Yeah. But like if you have a fake ID, kids trying to get into clubs or whatever. Yeah. But I said, if you have that fake identity, your identity, your DNA, that's the thing that's going to unlock the door to your destiny. But if you have a fake identity, if you have a fake ID, when you get to that door of your destiny, it's like you're in Pharaoh's house. You're there. You've been called up. Yeah. But if you are living under a fake identity, a fake DNA, you're not going to be able to unlock that destiny.
Wow.
And I think there are people that sometimes will even realize it in the moment. They'll be like, oh, this was the moment. If I would have been preparing for this and getting ready for this,
would be able to handle
this is the moment that I was supposed to be getting ready for. But because I've either been disappointed and I've just been stuck, or because I've been trying to be someone else, I'm not ready right now. Wow. I'm ready for another door, but I'm not ready for this door. And so we get to that moment, and it's like, this is the moment where this is your platform, this is your state, this is the relationship, the connection, or whatever. But we're not ready for it. And so many people miss that moment because they are living using someone else's identity, using someone someone else's social security security card. Yeah, it's literally.
And we love alliteration, but as you're talking, it's like and there may be more, but as you're talking, it's okay. The things that would cause this to happen is either your you don't step into what God is calling you to do. Why? And you mentioned that because you're disappointed or you haven't been developed. That's the two things. That's it. I think that's it. And there could be more. So as we're talking today, be very careful that you don't stop developing even when you've been rejected. That you don't stop developing even when you've been accused. You don't stop developing even when no one cares anymore. And then on the same thing, don't get disappointed to the point that you accept second best.
Yes.
Because he could have said, okay, I'm the head of the prison. I got good food. I got my own cell. I can take a bath when I want to. I'm safety. I got my own guards, whatever. And so this is as good as it's going to get in a hostile world. So I think disappointment and development are the two things that keep us from going into our destiny.
Yeah. And I think that's the whole idea is if you are coded for a comeback, if the DNA of your destiny, these different things, throw some in the D's that we talked about were DNA, destiny, development, discipline, all these different things were the whole throw some D's on it. But I think that's where we come to at the end is, are you willing to discipline yourself and discipline yourself in the dark place?
Yes.
Are you willing to discipline yourself?
Or are you willing to be disciplined by somebody else in the dark place?
And get the dream and get the ideas and be ready to deploy it, because another thing, I mean, we could talk forever, but another thing that I know is, just as you were talking, is he steps into that dream of, okay, Pharaoh was like, you interpreted everything, and he gives him that authority, gives them the ring, gives them all that kind of stuff. But in a way, it's contingent on you being able to do these things and save Egypt. So I'm giving this to you, and I'm saying, hey, you're second in command. You're all this kind of stuff. But we see over the next several chapters that his influence, he increased and did even more. But it was contingent on, okay, well, you're really wise. There's no one in the land as wise as you. Are you going to be able to save us from this disaster, from this natural disaster, this famine? Are you going to be able to save us? And then also, in turn, of course, saving his own family and his own people and the people of God. And there's a whole other thing about that, the lineage of Jesus. But I think we have to kind of get back to this place when it all boils down to it, that wherever you are in the dream, like wherever you are in the process right now, if you are a new believer and you're just now kind of getting a dream of what God wants to do in your life, or if you've been through some process, or if you're later in life, wherever you are, nowhere along the journey was he not working. Nowhere along the journey was he not faithful and getting his hands dirty. Yeah. So he may have eventually been the guy in the white hat that's driving around in the nice truck and pointing and saying, do this, do this, do this. But he still had to show up every day and tell them what to do so that he could save Egypt. Yeah. And we just have to understand, and I've even heard, I was at a conference and heard someone talk about this of how, I think it was actually Dawn Cherie Wilkerson, where she was talking about, the dream is hard work. Like we always talk about the dream, but living the dream is actually a lot harder than we actually think. So we always think of those big moments, those mountaintop moments where Pharaoh's like, you're the guy, here's the ring, and Joseph's like, I made it, and this is a dream, and all that kind of stuff. And so it's like, okay, we eat the cake, we had the confetti. All right, Joseph, now you've got a little bit of time to prepare. There's going to be 7 years of plenty, but then 7 years of famine. So we don't got time to waste.
And what are you going to do with the plenty? So it goes back to even like Moses, when God asked him, what do you have in your hand? And then I talked about the widow of Zarephath last night. It goes back to, can you do with your hands what's coming out of your mouth? Anybody can prophesy. Yeah. Anybody can
dream.
Talk the talk. I say dream. Anybody can dream. Anybody can sit back and do a big dream. We're in the middle of that with some things here and here. Always, you can have a big dream, but can you do with your hands? If he hadn't had the ability to build the silos and the wisdom to do that stuff, to design all that, it didn't say that Pharaoh came up with that. Joseph came up with that. So even though he was able to interpret the dream and he had a spiritual gift, he also had to be willing to have the ability in his hands. Where did that come from? That came from things that Potiphar had developed him to do. That was his bachelor's course. And then when he went into prison, that was his master's course. Right. And by the time he got ready to do his doctoral thesis, he was ready to step in and to take over.
Exactly. Man, that's such a good way to put it. And I think that's just what we have to encourage ourselves with, and when we look at this whole comeback thing, is it's not a comeback that when we come back, it's at the finish line, and that when your dream comes to pass, that's it.
Wow.
You're done.
Yeah.
You're done. And you did okay, God, you gave me the stamp of approval, you checked it off, and now I'm just able to kind of chill.
Yeah.
It's the dream is going to continue. And again, and we'll just wrap it up with this, but I think going back to the very beginning it's all been the dream. I think that's the deal that we have to realize is we see the end of the dream or the middle part of the dream or the high part of the dream, the celebratory part. But when you go back to the whole DNA, if it had been inside of him since he was born, if God knew him before he was even in his mother's womb, as it says in Jeremiah, then that means the whole process was the dream. That you can't get to the end result without going through that process.
And here's the clincher that when you said, I never thought this, it just hit me right here. No one ever interpreted Joseph's dream. It was only when Joseph was walking and fulfilling with his hands Pharaoh's dream that his dream came to pass, because his brethren came because they were hungry because of famine. No one ever interpreted his dream. It was only, and he interpreted
or celebrated it.
But instead of just interpreting Pharaoh's dream, he said, "I'll build your dream." And when he built Pharaoh's dream, it fulfilled the dream that he had about his brethren.
Wow.
Mic drop. That's it.
Oh, mic drop. Well, you talk about building other people's dreams, and I know this is something we talk about a lot, how Pharaoh is the king, but then it says Joseph became a father to Pharaoh. And I can't remember the exact history, but there's some debate whether some people believe that those were different pharaohs, and so the Pharaoh that he became a father to was a younger Pharaoh.
Yeah, a lot younger. Yeah,
and so we talk about this a whole lot, spiritual fatherhood and sonship and different things. Sometimes as spiritual sons or people or daughters, we say sons just kind of in a generic way, but when you're starting out, it's not until you press up your fathers or the people that are above you. But as you're pressing them up and lifting them up, you're being elevated yourself.
And don't even realize it.
And so eventually, though, you become the father, and you look back and you're like, well, I just been serving that. You said a story the other day, where you're able now to ask people to do things because 20, 30 years ago, people asked you to do those things, and you've been doing them for 20, 30, 40 years.
Absolutely.
And so now that you're kind of in that senior level role, you're like, I don't feel bad about disciplining people
I don't even say
and developing
please sometimes.
people. Right, because people want to be where you are. They see, and I'm just using you as an example, but they see your dream, okay, being in ministry all these years, having this family, having this ministry, traveling, all these different things, but you can look back and say, yeah, this has been the dream, but along that dream,
my Lord,
I was living through the discipline and the development and all that different stuff. And so I think people, as we serve other people, as we elevate, whether it's a sideline like the butler, the baker, and the cupbearer were, or whether it's someone above us or even beneath us, if we see them as beneath us, which I don't think we should really see people as beneath us, but as we're serving other people and helping prop up other people's dreams, really in that process, even if we don't see it, our dreams are being developed, and we're starting to live out our dreams.
So good.
Man, well, thank you guys for hanging out with us. We went a little bit longer.
This was a long one today.
There was a lot that I wanted to talk about today, but that's what this is for. I mean, people have been enjoying it. People have been diving into it. We always like to say, if you guys have suggestions, if you have ideas, if you have questions, let us know. This will be posted mainly on YouTube. We're working on some things with some apps and some different stuff. We'll be able to send that out to more places, which I'm excited about. But leave us a comment on YouTube. Send us an email, direct message. You can get our social media, both mine and Dad's social media, all that good stuff, our church social media. And also just share this with someone. It could be that it encourages someone. Maybe there was just one thing that we said, and you can say, hey, skip to 35 minutes into this podcast, and there's something really good that you need to listen to. But it would really encourage us if you would like this video, subscribe to the channel, share the video with someone, and drop a comment. All of those things, if if you're a viewer, if you're a part of Oasis, or if you're someone that knows us from our extended network and that sort of thing, it really does help us to reach more people if you drop a comment and like the video. Even if it's just something like, hey, great, I enjoyed this, that will tell YouTube to show it to more people. And so I know it takes a few extra seconds, but if you're still on right now, why don't you just drop a few comments, let us know if you enjoyed it, and we will see you next week. Dad's going to be continuing part 3 of our comeback series. Come on, what are you saying? The pullback to your comeback?
The whole back to your comeback.
The whole back to your comeback. So you guys be looking out for that. Make sure you catch the full sermon, and also we'll be recording another one of these in just a few days, kind of recapping that. So we love you guys. Make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.